President. Members will please remain standing while the Chief Executive enters the chamber. The Chief Executive. The Chief Executive will first address the Council. Madam President, honourable members, today I speak on my recent duty visit to Beijing. You may well recall that during the visit, Premier Wen Jiabao advised us to keep a clear head. The economic performance of Hong Kong last year was indeed remarkable, with GDP growth expected to reach over 6.5%. I am most happy to see the unemployment rate falling to a new low of 4.4% at a speed even faster than my own popularity rating. I've always undertaken my duties as the Chief Executive with prudence. To stay alert to the challenges that lie ahead, I have discussed with my colleagues on quite a few occasions the issue of whether Hong Kong will be marginalized. We must not overlook the long-term issues despite short-term good performance. I believe the upcoming couple of years would be defining years for Hong Kong. Our long-term stability and prosperity is to be defined by whether Hong Kong can play an irreplaceable role in the country's emergence as a global economic power. The world economy has entered an era of global competition. Hong Kong has to compete with cities within and without the region for a leading position in financial services, shipping, logistics, and tourism. Competition also takes place in areas of infrastructure like ports and airports, human capital, city attractiveness, and quality of life. Global competition is not an easy process. There is no room for a second-class city. Gone are the days when we could survive by serving as intermediaries when flow of information was limited. The purpose of my visit was to secure support from the central government to affirm Hong Kong's role as the financial center of the country, a regional financial center, and a world's financial center. The vision will be fulfilled gradually. During my stay in Beijing, I called on ministry and commission level officials to discuss policies on expansion of renminbi business in Hong Kong and ways to encourage quality enterprises to use Hong Kong as an investment and fundraising platform. On infrastructure, I will strive to start work on the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge as soon as possible so as to maintain Hong Kong's edge as a regional logistics hub. On the aviation front, we aim to resolve airspace congestion and to increase the capacity of Hong Kong Airport. The convention and exhibition sector will be promoted to boost business travel, to consolidate Hong Kong's role as a business information center between the mainland market and multinational corporations. The central government's responses have been positive in this regard. On the software side, a healthy environment and quality cultural life are essential to attracting talent to Hong Kong. To sustain our status as a world-class international city, public health issues of environmental pollution and food safety must be resolved through regional cooperation. To this end, I discussed with mainland officials during the visit ways to improve the mechanism on food safety control, and good progress has been made. We will continue to work closely with the Guangdong authorities to gradually improve the regional air quality. We've been working on measures to tackle the influx of pregnant mainlanders. I can assure you that we also have had debates on this floor before. I can assure you that we always put the well-being of local expecting women first, and we will provide sufficient hospital services and human resources to cope with the demand. Both members and the news media have recently been concerned about when I would announce my candidacy. Some have even urged me for an early announcement. Now I'd like to share with you my thoughts on the duty of a politician. First of all, it is my heavy duty as the incumbent chief executive to work with the whole community to maintain economic prosperity, to provide an environment where people can lead a happier life. I cannot afford to fail. As such, I believe that the effects of my personal election activities on the day-to-day governance must be kept to the minimum. Second, while I have developed new thinking and visions from occurrences and challenges in Hong Kong that I have faced from time to time, I am fully aware that it would not be appropriate for me as the current chief executive or as a candidate to the next chief executive election to promote any ideas that have not been well conceived. To be a responsible candidate, one must be fully prepared. I believe members here can do much better than I in presenting visions to the public. However, turning visions into reality is a different story. This entails the ability to plan, to coordinate, and to execute, and it requires repeated reviews, revisions, and consultations. I hope that my policy objectives for the next 5 years will not remain in practical visions. They should not just be simply about spending money while ignoring where we can get the money in the first place. They must be realistic rather than simply idealistic. I hope I can live up to my words. So at this moment, my role as the chief executive still comes above all else. Meanwhile, I am preparing myself to be a responsible candidate. I will announce my campaign arrangements in due course. Thank you very much. The chief executive will now answer questions raised by members. A member whose question has not or has been answered may, if necessary or for the purpose of elucidation only, ask a short follow-up question. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Madam President. I'm sure that the chief executive will agree that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting worse. We have seen the economy bounce back. Many people simply cannot benefit from the situation. Unemployment rate has come down, but wages are going no higher. Yesterday, we heard the announcement of the renminbi liberalization measures, but people simply cannot benefit from it. In Hong Kong, it's just like one traffic lane is flowing really fast, unimpeded, but the other lane is really congested, and traffic is going backward. If we go on like this, we will not get anywhere. Will the chief executive tell us whether he's got any new ideas to tackle the gap between the rich and the poor, any tax and financial measures or economic measures, like, for instance, any ideas to impose a tax or duty on equity for those tycoons who are making a tremendous amount of money, and that will enable the government to have more funding to help those who are in need. Thank you. Well, the economic performance in recent times have been really accelerating in terms of GDP, employment situation or inflation. over the past 10 years, this has been really good. But these are macro statistics, and it doesn't say much about the people in the lower rung of the community who cannot benefit from the prosperity, and they don't feel that their wages are going up. Surely the situation has become better. Mr. Lau, you talked about the wages going down. I mean, the situation has stopped, and there are not that many situations where the wages are going down. According to our statistics for the third quarter, those earning $15,000 or above, they take up 34% of the working population instead of 25% in 1996. Those making 9,000 or less in 1996, they take up 42% of the total working population. Now it is 36%. It has been shrinking. For the grassroots people earning 5,000 or less, they take up 5% of the population. So overall, the macro situation is doing better. But there are still poor people in our midst. So we have to do something about employment. We have to maintain the dignity of the workers instead of having them sign on the dole. That would be the driving force to improve their lot. I went to Beijing on a duty visit, and I have been saying that we need to improve the vitality of the community and create more job opportunities. As to labor protection, this has been debated here on many occasions. I also talked about this in the policy address as to how we can make sure that the wages will not be going any further down. We have a movement to protect the wages. I hope that this will bear fruit. If we coming up with an interim review after 1 year and a report in 2 years' time, we are determined about it. If this is not effective, we're going to be legislating to protect the interests of the workers. As to other initiatives like taxation measures and so on, I hope Mr. Lau, like other members, would be prepared to give their input at the time when the FS is still doing the consultation exercise. By all means, give him the views. We like to broaden the tax base. As you all know, as far as the GST is concerned, we have already halted the debate. We have to find alternative ways to broaden the tax base. We are receptive to opinions. Mr. Lau, our Chief Executive, we haven't answered me as to what measures there are to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. Well, on concrete measures, we have been talking about these on many occasions. In the policy address, I will also refer to some of them. I'm going to talk about these in future. I don't think 1 or 2 initiatives would be the answer to the problem. I think the fundamental issue is employment. There are specific measures like, for instance, traveling subsidies for remote areas, helping people with employment who are living in remote areas. We hope that we can strengthen the services for people in remote areas. We will continue to do that. But Mr. Lau, I think the most important thing is job creation. We have to create job opportunities. We have to boost the dynamism in our economy, and that way, with a dynamic economy, there would be more job opportunities and wages will be going up. The economy is bouncing back, and the wages are also going up. They have not going any further down now. Mr. David Lee, Madam President, the stock market is doing very well now. The interest rate is very low. What prognosis do you have for the economy of Hong Kong in the coming year? Well, the economy is doing well, the stock market is doing well, everybody is happy about it. I think it shows that it shows a few phenomena there. First of all, mainland funding finds this a suitable investment market, and a lot of IPOs are being invested in Hong Kong. And after some successful IPOs, and also given the good fundamentals in the market, more corporations would be coming to Hong Kong to be listed, and that would continue for some time. Economically, the interest rate in the US has leveled off, and the employment situation has improved. The household income has also improved. Given this situation, for the short term and medium term, the forecast is going to be pretty optimistic. But we must bear in mind that we have to guard against any fluctuations in the stock market. The Hang Seng Index can go up rapidly, but it can also reverse just as rapidly. The Thai baht has experienced some fluctuation. You're an expert, Mr. Lee. I'm sure that you're aware that there would have an impact on the stability of the regional market. I think investors have to be careful. They have to tread carefully. They have to assess their ability to shoulder the risks. In terms of monetary management, the government has to manage the market better. With a bigger market, we have to have the competence to regulate the market like in London, so that the market will be moving in an orderly manner. And we ought to seize this opportunity to turn Hong Kong into a truly international financial center. Mrs. Sophie Leung. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Tsang, a moment ago you said that Hong Kong can be an international financial center, and I learned that the nation is all in support of this. Will you tell us, please, as a financial center of the country, how important it is for the future development of Hong Kong, and also mainland cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen are also developing very rapidly in terms of a financial market. How can we avoid having any vicious competition, which is going to be, how can we supplement each other in our advantages in future developments?
Well, being a financial centers cannot be too many. There cannot be too many financial centers in the world, because only where we can have a good financial center will we be able to be successful. If you look worldwide, well, in North America, in Latin America, and also Central America, we can only see one major financial center, that is New York. And in Europe, they have been developing for such a long time. And if you look at their monetary system, they only have one major financial center there, that is London, and therefore we need to have a lot of supporting factors before we can develop into an international financial center. We have to look at our own infrastructure. We also have to look at our own legal system, and also our conventions, and also whether or not we can have sufficient number of talents, and so on and so forth, before we can make it work. And also we also have to look at their own regulatory system, and also the degree of liberty before we can achieve that. So if you look at Asia and also this time zone, which place can have the right conditions to become an international financial city, we believe that Hong Kong does have the right conditions for that. And indeed, this is the right time for us to compare ourselves with New York and London. And such financial centers, once they are established, once they have established their status, then that would also be complementary to the development opportunities for different sectors, and that would also be good. That's why in New York, the unemployment rate would not be very high. In London, similarly, the unemployment rate would not be very high, because financial and monetary affairs would also be the driving force for other developments in other sectors. So the situation is very similar to Hong Kong. So I believe that if we can work in that direction together with our technological advancement, and also in terms of our infrastructure, if we remain competitive, then I believe that Hong Kong will obviously have this edge in the Asian time zone, so that when trade forces and also when our financial forces are able to compare ourselves with New York and London, then we'll be able to compete or compare ourselves with New York and London. As regards competition, we have to look at our own infrastructure, and that's not confined to how much money is being invested in Hong Kong. But why do they have to invest in Hong Kong? Why do they have to bring money to Hong Kong to invest here? That's because they have trust in your city, and they also have trust in the opportunities for investment, and that would also demand a lot of good work and hard effort. And we will have to look at ourselves. We have our legal infrastructure. We also have our free system, and whether or not our government is trustworthy, and whether or not the market is stable, and whether or not we have a good regulatory system in place. So if you look elsewhere in the country, there isn't any other city that can compare with us, and that's why during my duty visit to Beijing, I've already made it very clear that is Hong Kong's financial center status cannot be replaced, and that's the reason why we have managed to do that. Supplementary question. Yes, the Liberal Party is very happy to hear this big target. And Mr. Zhang, you said that in terms of talents, that would also be very important. And in the financial sector's development, in fact, many have been returning Chinese. So how are we going to maintain our competitive edge? Then in terms of education, we will have to do a bit more. So that's my follow-up question. Yes, that's essential, because what we have to strive for is not just money and investment. We also need to have talents. And in Hong Kong does have a very relaxed immigration regime. So talents from worldwide, if they think they would like to come to Hong Kong to settle, then they would be most welcome. That's why in the financial sector, we have been able to attract talents from all over the world, from Japan, from the US, from Europe. So talents from all over the world are working here, doing business here. The reason why we have been able to do that, that's because we have a rather liberal immigration regime, and a lot of work has also been done to tie with that. For example, if you look at international schools in Hong Kong at present, well, in terms of cultural diversity and also in terms of air quality and everything, I think we are all working on those fronts in order to achieve this objective. That is, we have to maintain the quality of life for our people. We also would like to attract intellectuals from overseas, in particular those who demand high quality of life. They are professionals in the financial sector. They would be willing to come to Hong Kong to settle and settle here. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, CE, during your duty visit in Beijing, you indicated this. That is, according to what you saw, well, this is the best times in the past 20 years, and I believe that many members of the public would agree that, you yourself would see this year as the best year in 20 years, because you used to be the Secretary for Financial Services, and now, and then you became the Financial Secretary. Now you became the CE. But then many people indicated in a survey that when compared to 10 years ago, there has been no improvement economically, and some 34% of them actually felt that the quality of life has been worse off when compared to 10 years ago. So my question for you as the Chief Executive, apparently your judgment is very different from those of the public. So why is it so? Would that also affect the government's policy-making process? Well, I believe that individuals, as I said, my answer to Mr. Lau Chin-shek's question, any figures would also see a lot of history behind them, and many from the lower rung of society might not be able to enjoy the fruits of economic prosperity. But then if you look at the macro figures, I have also done some study myself, and of course my study direction would be somewhat different from the DP, and also the samples would also be somewhat different. But then I've been looking at the figures for the entire territory. For example, if you look at GDP figures, during the last 3 years, the GDP growth has been over 7.5%. If you look at the past 20 years, never have we been able to achieve that growth figure. And in the 90s, in the early 90s, yes, for 3 consecutive years, we have been able to maintain steady growth, but then the growth rate was only 6.3%. So if you look at that from this perspective, we have already seen that it's already the best year in 10 years. And secondly, looking at inflation, we have been able to maintain that at below 2%. And when compared to the rapid development phases in the past, where we had 7, 8, or 9% of inflation, is very different. And that's why the consumption power of the public has also been improved. So that is also something good. And thirdly, if you look at the economic structure, we can see that at present, if you look at our financial service sector and also logistics and everything, well, they have become more sophisticated, and they have been able to cope with sudden onset of incidents coming from elsewhere, and we have been better able to cope with financial turmoils than we used to be in the past. And if you look at other figures, if you look at the trade turnover, is more than 3 times the GDP, or 2 times when compared to 10 years ago. And also, if you look at our own structure, well, amongst our labor force, professionals are accounting for some 40% of the total working force, and people attaining tertiary education have also accounted for some 30% of the labor force. And I think these are improvements, and that's also the best in 20 years. And if you look at income of people, as I cited some figures, well, 10 years ago, people earning more than $15,000 accounted for 25% of the total labor force, and or 34%, and for those earning low income, the percentage has also come down. So during the past few years, we have been doing very well when compared to the past 20 years. And if you look at the average income is $27,100. It's also a record high. And also in the past, we also managed to achieve $27,000. But then because that was a period of high inflation, and therefore the spending power was a lot less. And at present, with $27,000 income a month, you will be able to have better purchasing power. So if you look at these macro figures, I have to repeat that again. Well, these are code figures, but then if you look at those figures, we have been doing a lot better than in the past. And of course, we have to do a lot better to help the lower rung of society to enjoy the fruit of success of our economy. Mr. Sin, I would also like to share with you one code figure. Well, compared with 10 years ago, Gini coefficient used to be 0.4 before the handover. Now it's 0.525. Simply put, it shows that over the past 10 years, the gap between the rich and the poor has widened. And that would also affect the government's governance, because if the gap is widening, yes, on the whole, Hong Kong might have seen some improvements, but then it only means that, well, the rich are becoming better off, and the poor is becoming worse off. So looking at the widening gap between the rich and the poor, yes, our economy is doing a lot better, but then if you look at the lower rung of society, they have not been able to feel the success of our economy. They have not been able to share the fruit of success in our economy. Then on the part of the government, what can you do to help them? I think I've already answered the question by Mr. Kwok-hung. We have to increase the economic dynamism and also vitality, so that our workers can become more competitive, and that is the only way that we can protect the workers in the low rungs of society. As regards as assistance or other CSSA assistance, that would not be helpful. In fact, that would also be detrimental to their dignity. So we have to work in the area that I mentioned. I believe that Gini's coefficient, I have some doubts that whether or not it's applicable to certain economic structures. In particular, when we attract so many well-off people in the financial sector to come to Hong Kong, can we simply use the Gini coefficient to reflect whether or not the general public's standard of life has been declining? And of course, the gap might have widened. But then the thing that we have to do is to ensure that the poor will not be worse off. Well, and there needs to be social mobility in a community. So that's what we are working for. Yes, we have 150 people coming to Hong Kong to settle from the mainland, and many of them do not have many resources, and they might be in the lower rung of society, and therefore these are issues that we have to face. We should welcome them. We have the resources. We also need to have new blood in our society, but then to become better off, they will have to work hard, and some people might have to wait for another generation before they can move up the social ladder. So we cannot just look at the wages of the lower rung of society, and we cannot expect the government to adopt administrative measures to improve their life. But then if we work harder, then their life will continue to improve. The most important thing is this year, even if the year has not been good, then we hope that next year things will improve.
Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Thank you, Madam President. Chief Executive. In the PRD, the aviation, airspace, and so on has been besetting the aviation industry over the past 3 years. Delays have been really the order of the day. The DAB did write to the CPPCC our proposal. I know that during your duty visit, this matter also came up a moment ago. It was said that we hope the capacity of the Hong Kong airport can be boosted. I know that the Premier is also concerned about it, and the Guangdong authorities and the central government and the SARG will be sitting together to work out some solution. Have you come back with any good news for us, please? On various occasions, this matter was brought up, and the issue has got really worse. The Ministry of Aviation in the mainland and also our counterpart in Macau have also been working hard on that. Back in 2004, about 3 years ago, a tripartite group had been set up. We have to optimize the airspace, and a number of adjustments have been made, and that did make a difference. But there was a saturation point, and it would be difficult for us to come up with solution because of the ever-expanding aviation. We need more airspace to fit in more flights in the airspace. The Premier is responded to this positively. He put this on the agenda of the State Council, and this has been put on top of the State Council's agenda. The State Aviation Bureau and all the relevant authorities will have to come up with improvement measures. The problem doesn't happen to PRD, but also in the Yangtze River Delta. Shanghai is suffering similar problems. I think we need more airspace open up for civilian flights. I know the central government is very concerned about this. Through this tripartite task force, we like to secure more or better coordination to expand the airspace. The immediate issue is the airspace from Hong Kong to the eastern part of China. That's the most immediate task for us. Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Madam President, will the Chief Executive be liaising with the regional authorities and the tripartite task group to come up with a timetable for putting forward a solution? The coordination in aviation is very important. If we're going no further in this area, it would have it would impinge on the logistics industry and also our aviation hub. Well, that would be given top priority. The Premier has put this on top of the agenda. I don't think this matter would be slow to be handled. The airspace is not under our jurisdiction, but I'm sure that we're going to have a positive response. In the near future, we hope that we can find a solution. Mr. Fernando Cheung. Madam President, thank you. A moment ago, in answer to Mr. Sin and Mr. Lau on the question of the gap between the rich and the poor, a lot of statistics were quoted. It seems to us that given the economic improvement, the livelihood has been improved. The Bohemia Foundation published a report about the livelihood situation. The Bohemia Foundation is very close to the chief executive. The chief executive attaches a great deal of importance to allies, and I hope that he will listen to these statistics. For those earning less than $8,000, it has gone up to $500 million from the 200,000 in 1997. And the percentage has gone up from 13% to 22%. The contrast between the rich and the poor has gone up from 16% to 23 times, 16 times to 23 times between 96 and 06. And there are more and more low-income households, and many children are living in single-parent, low-income households. I know that the chief executive answered this question twice, but all these statistics that demonstrate that the measures that you have put in place do not seem to be very effective. The economy may be doing better, but the gap between the rich and the poor is getting no better. The disadvantaged, the underprivileged are still suffering a great deal. Mr. Chief Executive talked about improving the economy. I think that you do need to put forward some concrete measures, and I look forward to some concrete measures from the Chief Executive to improve the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Well, this is not a policy address, and this is not a time for making available my platform. I think for specific measures, I think these should be for a separate occasion. I only talk about the direction. I talked about these in the policy address. As to specific measures, we can debate them in the days to come. Mr. Zheng, you might also wish to come up with specific measures for debate. As to the gap between the rich and the poor, this is not something unique to Hong Kong or any advanced countries. This is a problem that is besetting them. This is not an issue that can be resolved in one single day. I hope that we look at the issue from a macro point of view. As to micro level, we would like to deal with the cases on a case-by-case basis. I've seen the Bohemia report, and that is talking about household income. It's not the same as individual income. There are more and more household, single-parent household, and there are elderly household involving elderly people, and I think this household income is something that is food for thought for us. But for individual income, there has been an improvement. What I said, what Mr. Sin said, and what you said represent the cold statistics. There are people in our midst who need our concern. I think we need to discuss all these issues on a case-by-case basis. We have done a lot of things. We have put in a lot of initiatives. We continue to do so. And this is a caring society, and we will not be neglecting this group of people. The key issue is not just to help them, but also to upgrade the quality of life and to enable them to move up the social ladder. Let's hope that they're doing better the next year and the year after next.
Mr. Zhang, without concrete measures or policies, it's difficult for us to engage in concrete discussions, because it's just stating the obvious. We all want life to be better, and we've been talking about that for 10 years. Well, if China does well, then Hong Kong will be doing well as well. So I hope that you can come up with some concrete measures, and if the civil society has not been able to come up with concrete initiatives. In fact, I would like to comment on that, because in the past, the civil society has been putting forth a lot of proposals. Well, can you put forth your concrete question, please? Well, I hope that the administration would be able to respond to some suggestions by the civil society, or else Hong Kong people would not have something to look forward to. Thank you for your comment. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Madam President, the Chief Executive just responded to the prospect of its candidacy for the next term, and recently you've also responded to some questions from the media. I think the question has been very similar. You said that you would like to focus on your work as the Chief Executive, and of course from the perspective of the public this is something good. But Chief Executive, if you think that you have to focus on your work as the incumbent Chief Executive, then we have a lot of questions that have yet to be resolved or that have yet to see any improvements. For example, the Action Blue Sky, and also heritage conservation and protection, and also for defaulting of wages by employers. Well, there has not been any improvements. We have Sing Pao and also Lucky House. And just this morning, I received complaints about another incident of defaulting wages, and also for minimum wage. And you talk about wage protection movement. I am not going to talk about the effectiveness or otherwise of this movement, but then we have also seen incidents, and also food safety on the mainland and so on. So these are a series of problems that have yet to be resolved. And also recently, we have also seen the HEC, or the Hong Kong Electric, increasing electricity tariff. So no improvement has been made in these areas. So we have not seen what is being done by the administration to improve all these, and how the public will be able to air their grievances. So Chief Executive, with regard to your recent work, is it like what you just said? You've been focusing on the issues that the public are most concerned about, or is it that you just making these pledges, and then when Mr. Alan Leung has already got the admission ticket to the election race, and therefore in private you are just looking at a political platform that would be workable, so that you'll be able to debate with him later, without actually addressing those issues that the public are most concerned about. So the public are concerned where you have put your mind to, or is it that you're just making these pledges in public, but then you're actually working on something else? Well, Hong Kong is a very open society, and it's also a highly transparent society, and every day things happen. Every day we do have problems. If there are no problems every day, then it's not a dynamic society. Yes, we do have problems every day. Yes, you have just talked about some problems that we have encountered, and if you join our morning meetings every day, then you know that there are other problems elsewhere. In fact, it's not just that we are concerned about these problems and we've been looking at solutions to these problems. Actually, you're also working very hard to address those issues, and issues are being discussed in this council every day. And actually, our colleagues have been making responses to your questions as to what is being done by the administration to address those problems. And of course, these issues might not be resolved overnight. We've been responding to issues or questions raised by you. For example, yesterday you talked about pregnant women problems and also heritage conservation. We've been telling you what our strategies would be. And Mr. Leung, I don't know if you're happy with that, but then I can only say that it shows that we have been working very hard, and we also have been working for the long-term interests of Hong Kong, and we are trying to work hard for the long-term solutions to these problems, because we are a responsible government. So I can only have trust in the public, and in the government we've been working very hard, and I've been working very hard day in, day out for these issues. And the issues that you raise, our colleagues have been responding to those in a very specific manner. And some of these issues simply cannot be resolved overnight, because some of these are beyond our ambit. For example, on food safety, yes, all our food items are imported elsewhere. Yes, there are problems on food safety, but then these are not problems that we have created ourselves, because these are things that are happening elsewhere affecting us. So what we can do is to do what we can to protect our citizens' health. But then it doesn't mean that where there are problems, we are a problematic society. It doesn't. It's not true, because it only shows that we are a highly transparent society. When there are problems, we try to address them, and in the government, we're trying to work hard to address those issues, so that the public know that we have been doing our part, and that's what I've focused on. Mr. Leung, thank you, Madam President. Yes, society will definitely have problems. If not, it's is not a sophisticated society. But then, very often when there are problems, it shows whether or not there is leadership in the government to resolve these problems. It's not about my personal happiness with your answers, but then it's like your popularity rating. If nothing concrete is done about those issues, then your popularity rating will come down. So, CE, you have talked about being a people-oriented government and so on. But then, very often, if we look at your policies, you're actually doing the other way around. All right. And some people have been working for a particular employer for 10 years, and yet they've been laid off all of a sudden by the end of the year. So these are issues of public concern. So why have we not been given priority to these, and why are we not working to ensure that people will be able to maintain a decent life, so that people will be able to be reassured, so that they can live happily in this community? Yes, in the government, we employ 160,000 in the civil service. We also have 16,000 contract staff. We do have a responsibility as an employer, but then there will definitely be mobility when there are changes to the post. We have to recruit some new recruits, and elsewhere we might have to lay off some people. So you were referring to the non-civil service contract staff, and we have 16,500 such contract staff. And recently we conducted a very in-depth review, and 4,000 should be transferred to the permanent establishment of the establishment. But then for 10,000, these are non-recurrent jobs, and some are just for short term, and they are not working 44 hours a week. And in some cases, they are just working on a particular project, and upon completion of that project, they will have to go. So there would definitely be mobility within the civil service, and therefore, when we deal with such a non-civil service contract staff, yes, we'll be trying our best to help them find jobs, and we'll try our best not to lay off anybody. But then as an employer and also as a taxpayer, well, we have been asked by the taxpayers to manage public finances. We have to do our job properly. In the past, the SAR government, and also like the previous governments, we have been trying our best to be a good employer, and I think that has been well established. And for minimum wage, we have been introducing a number of measures, and we have done our best to protect workers' interests, and definitely that is an unshakable responsibility, and that would continue to be given top priority. Mr. Chin Pui-chong, Chief Executive, in November last year, on the 18th, the state president met you in Vietnam, and he made 4 requests. Number 1, you will have to revive the economy, and also you will have to maintain social harmony, and you will also have to do a good job in the CE election. And recently you said that Hong Kong's economy has been the best in 20 years, and as a result of that, there's been some confusion in the community. If that is the case, why has the state president asked you to revive the economy? So can you tell us what your thoughts are on this? Well, the president has not talked about deep-rooted conflicts in our community. He just said that as the chief executive, we have to make sure that the economy will do well. Well, there are many problems in our community, and very often they might be related to our economy, and if we can do better, then we'll be able to maintain the vitality of our economy. And in fact, he has also said that our economy is doing well, and he said that we must maintain this. We must not allow the economy to go into the doldrums. I think there is no discrepancy between what I said and what he said. In fact, the good performance of our economy is something that he has confirmed, but then we will have to maintain that momentum. We must not allow it to be neglected. And we have to sustain that, because that is a very important factor to maintain people's livelihood. But why is it that the state president has asked you to work even harder? If he thinks that you have already been doing very well, then he should have said that, well, you have done a very good job. Why did he have to say that you will have to work even harder? And if my interpretation is not correct, then I simply am not qualified to become a lawmaker. Well, whether or not you are qualified to become a lawmaker is your own decision. Thank you. Dr. Lee Ming-hwa. Thank you, Madam President. With the support from the central government, mainland enterprises and private enterprises have been coming to Hong Kong for listing, and Hong Kong has become a financial center. So have you taken more measures to attract more mainland corporations and also corporations from elsewhere, for example, from Taiwan, to be listed in Hong Kong so that Hong Kong can become the financial center for Asia?
Well, our objective is not to be a financial center in Asia, but international financial center. In 2006, we have been doing very well. We have raised capital of $330 billion, which is ranking about either top or the second in the world. We have surpassed New York in this regard in terms of capital raising, but we will not be complacent. Not only do we have to lure mainland enterprises to be listed in Hong Kong, but also Caymans and Taiwan and other regions. Established enterprises should be attracted to Hong Kong to be listed. I know that the stock exchange and the SFC are looking into this. They first of all would look at places like Australia, Colombia, in Canada, and so on, where the rules and regulations are pretty similar to Hong Kong. I know that the stock exchange and SFC will be coming up with a more clear mechanism where it would specifically refer to the enterprises in different places that are welcome to Hong Kong. Work is in hand, and there would be an announcement in the near future. I hope that you would pay attention to that. Dr. Lui, will the Chief Executive tell us, please, to be an international financial center, do we have to look at the international element? By comparison with London and New York, how international are we in Hong Kong? I think we compare favorably with these places. Our market is pretty big. In the US, the financial strength is actually bigger. I mean, Japan, China, Hong Kong put together will not be as big as New York or Europe. I am confident that given the sound economic development in the mainland, the Asian region, Japan, Thailand, Korea, and so on, will be experiencing growth. In the Asian region, the cumulative total of GDP would be very close to Europe and America, and the strength in the region would certainly be comparing favorably with London and New York. Mr. Wong Yong Kan, Chief Executive, food safety has become very much a problem in recent times. This has aroused the concerns of the people of Hong Kong and the people on the mainland. People know better about the source, the control from farm to table. The Center for Food Safety has been established. We have seen, however, all the problems with Sudan red and all kinds of chemicals in different of food products like fish and so on. You visited different bureau commissions and ministries to make sure that food safety would not be a problem. On the 1st of January, in terms of egg import, eggs have to be accompanied by certificates. What about parallel imports of such products? We don't really have a sound food safety standard in Hong Kong. The Center for Food Safety doesn't seem to have any expertise on the latest development, and they don't really have any expertise on source management. So, Chief Executive, how can you make sure that the Center for Food Safety officials would be behaving better, would be doing a better job? Mr. Wong, let me share with you my thoughts in this regard, and also in particular legislation. The people are very concerned about food safety, and the quality of life has improved. To ensure our status as an international financial center, we have to work better on this. We cannot stick to the conventional mindset. The systems are not sophisticated enough. Imported eggs and fish and experience some problems, and we also heard of problems about Maltai wine. All food products coming to Hong Kong will have to be registered. The importers have to be registered. And we have to specify our food safety standard, and we must have regulations in place. As far as the importers are concerned, they have to produce certificates from the place of origin to show that the products measure up to the safety standard in Hong Kong. And also in Hong Kong, we also need to conduct random sampling on a more regular basis. For these to happen, we have to do these steps on a gradual basis. It may take a bit of time, but this has to be done. We need to register all the importers. Certificates have to be produced, and that step we have to take a bit of time. We need to liaise with relevant jurisdictions, and we have to make sure that we have consistent food safety standards without any particular discrepancy. I hope that within this confine, we like to go down the legislative route, and we like to have subsidiary legislation in place to bring in all these steps, all the way from egg to fish and so on. These are the steps that I envisage. And we can certainly debate further on the steps that are going to be taken. I went to Beijing, the AQSIQ. Their response was very positive. For food products to be accompanied by certificates would take time. This is really a massive undertaking, and we like to start with the food products that are consumed more regularly by the public first. As to the Center for Food Safety, it has a lot of work to do: registration, quality control, and so we cannot be too harsh, so harsh that nobody can measure up to the standard, because then we'll end up with nothing to eat. And if we insist on a standard which is higher even than Japan, I mean, do we really need to go that far? If we can resolve all these problems, the long-term problems can be resolved, because otherwise we're going to be seeing problems arising on a daily basis. The mainland authorities are very concerned about this, and we do need to have a sophisticated system to respond to the situation. As soon as registration is done, Mr. Wong, I'm sure that the products brought in by parallel import can be detected, and if they are not coming in otherwise than the legitimate source, then it would be illegal. And we also have introduced the RFID technology for us to provide us with an audit trail, which enable us to trace the origin of the food products, and that would enable us to stamp the parallel imports. The Center for Food Safety is a new institution. The colleagues there are well trained. Some of them have been to the US CDC for exchange, and let's give the center a little bit of time. I'm sure that it will be able to do a better job. Mr. Wang.
Thank you, Madam President. Yesterday, I went with the some of the fruit importers to meet with the environment, the relevant bureaus, and recently we heard about the registration. But then apparently, how are you going to be able to track down the source of such imports? So yes, the accountability officials would also have to do somewhat better in order to enhance the quality. Well, I talk about the registration procedures, and if the mainland is willing to do that, then we will have to respond to that so that we will be able to react promptly. Yes, we would like to complete the registration procedures as promptly as possible, but then things take time. Mrs. Selina Chow. Thank you, Madam President. During your duty visit before you came back, you reported several pieces of good news, and one of them was that, and I particularly welcome that. That's Premier Wen said that he would support that Hong Kong would become. He would like Hong Kong to become the convention exhibition center for the country, and the central government would also be working closely with the SAR government to enhance our status as a convention and exhibition center. So I'd like to ask the chief executive, how are you going to ensure that international major activities or events will be held in Hong Kong? In particular, how are you going to make use of our territory-wide network to expand such exhibitions and convention facilities? And also, first of all, will the country be invited to stage their major conventions and exhibitions in Hong Kong so that Hong Kong will become their first choice for such events to be held, so that we'll be able to have a solid foundation to face the increasing competition from our neighbors in the region? Well, I made a suggestion to Mr. Wen, to Premier Wen. That's because recently we have staged several major events very successfully, and the feedback from the organizers have been very positive. And also, in terms of our convention and exhibition facilities, we have invested recently in further developments. For example, if you look at the Asia World Expo, we have been working on the stage 2 development, and also in terms of the HKCEC, we are also looking at how we can further expand the facilities. So we have new facilities coming on stream, and it's not just the hardware development. In terms of software, we have got a world-class software here, and Premier Wen has also responded positively to that, and a lot of follow-up work will have to be taken. Well, what I've worked on is to turn Hong Kong into an international city, and therefore we will have to liaise closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I've been talking to Mr. Li Zhaoxing, the minister, and he supported that, and that was also recorded. And on this, we'll be working with the Hong Kong's liaison office and the commissioner, because they know what international exhibitions will be held, and we will have to look at which exhibitions should be staged in Hong Kong, and that is something that we will have to work on. And at the provincial and cities level, we will also have to do a bit more liaison work so that we can help them, so that we'll be able to display to them that we are able to stage such exhibitions and conventions, and we'll be able to offer assistance to them. And also through the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, we'll be working with the different ministries, including the Ministry of Commerce, and also the ministries which are responsible for organizing such exhibitions and so on, so that they will consider Hong Kong as the venue for their exhibitions and conventions. We'll be taking follow-up action, and we will also be following up on our part. And I'm sure we will also be working with the Tourism Board, and that is also a way forward. I would not allow, let me repeat, I will not allow this opportunity to be seized by somebody else. I'm very pleased to hear that the Chief Executive and the SAR government have such determination, because we all know that for conventions and exhibitions, they'll be able to bring in a lot of people, and their spending power would be very high. And also in the past, they are also more willing to spend than the average visitors. And I'm also very pleased to hear that you will be trying your best so that if the country is willing to use Hong Kong as the base for their major exhibitions, that would also be good, because that would lead the way for other events to be held here. But we in Hong Kong, all right, Hong Kong people also have a very extensive network, and the tourism board has also been and also the TTC has been working very hard to strive for such activities or events to be held in Hong Kong, and also different sectors have also got their liaison network, and that would also be very helpful. So will the chief executive try to do this within the government, so that you'll be contacting with the private sector and all quarters of the community, so that they will all be involved in the process? I believe that with the joint effort, that would also be helpful, and that would also make it more successful. Yes, we cannot rely solely on the government to do it, and we also cannot solely rely on the country to do it. And of course, we might need their help. For example, for the ITU, yes, we have made a proposal, but then only with the assistance from the country had we been able to do that. And of course, we will be able to bring in more businessmen, and of course, the TDC will also be able to work in this area. So long as we know about the opportunities, for example, we might know what is in the pipeline for the next 5 years. If we know that we have venues appropriate for those events, we'll be focusing on that. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Madam President. All right, the chief executive has been talking about vision and the ability to realize the vision. I've heard a saying, it's not what I said, is somebody in England, he said that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, what does this saying suggest? All right, with the best of intention and vision, if the power is not regulated, then that would not bring about good results. All right, when it comes to vision, I've never heard Foster talking about vision. I think you're acting like Foster. All right, you talk about making your vision into, turning your vision into reality. I think it's just an empty talk. Well, for an individual without any vision, then he is not leading a meaningful life. Well, can you ask a question? So my question for the chief executive is, just now our colleagues have asked you many things. Everything you said that you would not be able to talk about the specifics in a nutshell. You do not have the answers, and you were just boasting your ability to turn vision into reality. But in fact, there is nothing concrete in what you said. What is my vision? And I want this, that is to rehabilitate June Falls so that everybody will be able to celebrate. And that is the vision of many people, and also many on the mainland. And over 65% of the directly elected members would like to advocate for 0708 direct elections. So I'd like to ask you, as a chief executive, would you like to enjoy absolute power? Are you in favor of this? And have you talked to Beijing? Have you shared this with Beijing? That is the vision of yourself and also the community, and also Foster. Have you done that? If you have not done that, and then I'd like to point this out to you. That is, you do not have a vision, or you have failed to turn your vision into reality. That is, you do not have the ability to turn your vision into reality. That is the universal suffrage for 2012, and also after 2012, universal suffrage for this council. And I repeat that once again. it's a disgrace that nobody is talking about the small circle election being a disgrace. All right, you might say that I'm talking rubbish. So can you answer my question? And what is your ability to turn your vision into reality? What about universal suffrage or direct election in 2012? And also the elimination of collusion between the business sector and the government. Because what I've been saying is that that's because government's power is not checked. That's the case for Hong Kong and on the mainland. That's the crux of the matter for the gap between the rich and the poor.
Please be seated, Mr. Leung. Chief Executive, please. As I said, we do have visions every single day. How can we turn visions into reality would require efforts. It's not simply a matter of talking. I go along with members that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is a fact plain to everybody. Fortunately, we don't really have absolute power in Hong Kong. All the powers enjoyed in Hong Kong are subject to monitoring by the media and indeed by the Legislative Council. And this is made very clear in the Basic Law nobly, including the Chief Executive would enjoy or exercise their powers unchecked. Universal suffrage, I fully appreciate members' sentiments. We are working on this collectively. It's not simply a matter of sloganeering about translating vision into reality. The Commission on Strategic Development is working hard on that. We would like to come up with a consensus. We'd like to come up with the best way to achieve universal suffrage for the Chief Executive and also for the legislature. How can we achieve the best consensus for universal suffrage? At the Commission on Strategic Development, on the CE universal suffrage, we have had some ideas, and we are beginning to achieve a focus. And as for the legislature, we are still no closer to coming up with a consensus with regard to let's go universal suffrage. Even for the pan-Democrats, they are no closer to achieving a consensus. So we have to sit down and talk about the best way forward. For 2012, if we want to achieve universal suffrage in that year, we need to put in the efforts. I hope Mr. Leung will do the same. Mr. Leung, during your duty visit, when you met the Beijing leaders, did you tell the state leaders your vision for universal suffrage in 2012? We need their blessing. If this is not brought up, how can we achieve our vision? If you don't have the vision, fine. I mean, or you have the vision, but you dare not bring this up. Well, I try to answer my question, your question. During the visit, it's not appropriate for me to talk to you about individual issue. I cannot really talk about the issues one by one. And basically, the discussions revolve three areas: the political situation in Hong Kong, the focus of attention in Hong Kong, and the economy in Hong Kong. We devote a lot of attention and time on these different issues. For 2012, I said that I would work hard on that. I do have my vision, but as Chief Executive, I have to tread carefully because I'm not working on behalf of myself. I'm working on behalf of the people of Hong Kong. So we would like to have a consensus achieved in Hong Kong, and thereafter, I will try my very, very best to get the best deal for Hong Kong. Mr. Wong Kwok-hung. Thank you, Madam President. Chief Executive, I heard that you went to Tung Chung during your term for a visit. Are you aware that in Tung Chung, because of the deficient planning, poverty, and unemployment is very much a problem. I mean, the whole town is like a deserted island. I mean, the traveling expenses are very high. From Tung Chung to the urban area would cost $1,000 to $2,000 in terms of traveling expenses. The low-income people earn something like $6,000 per month. It takes up a quarter or one-third of what they are making a month. The Commission on Poverty provides traveling subsidy for people to look for jobs, but for these low-income people, the Commission on Poverty doesn't want to offer any assistance at all. We conducted some studies. Half of the people are hovering around the CSSA level, and a quarter of the people are actually suffering from depression, higher than the 8.3% of the overall of Hong Kong. So, Chief Executive, have you got any ideas how the people, the low-income people living in remote areas like Tung Chung can be assisted? And are you going to offer them a traveling subsidy? And how are you going to resolve the problems for them in terms of transportation? Well, the FS has done a lot of work, and you may say that the existing system is imposing too many constraints, and this is being considered at the moment. I think we need to look further into that. I'm quite interested in Tung Chung. I didn't know about Tung Chung now. I knew Tung Chung back in 1969 when it was first developed. I pay a visit to Tung Chung on a regular basis. Tung Chung is a new town. Definitely, the facilities may be wanting, but things are being improved on a gradual basis in terms of recreational facilities, in terms of medical care. Gradually, all the facilities will be coming along as the Tung Chung new town is developing. The employment situation is not all that bad. There is the airport. There is the Ongping 360. The situation is not all that bad. I'm sure that you're aware of the grassroots workers' situation. As to traveling subsidies, the Financial Secretary is considering that. I think we have to be fair. We have to be sensible. And where do we draw the line? It would be a very difficult thing to do. We are using taxpayers' money, and I think we need to come up with a sensible solution. Mr. Wong Kwok-hung, Madam President, the Chief Executive hasn't quite addressed the issue, and he said that solutions are being identified. I've pointed out that the existing measures cannot offer any assistance to these low-income group. In Tung Chung, we've conducted the studies. Findings will be made available to you, Chief Executive. For the low-income people earning $6,000, if one-third or quarter of the pay goes to traveling expenses, how can you encourage people to look for jobs? They can't even find a job at the airport. As I said a moment ago, the Financial Secretary is looking into this. I didn't answer the question specifically because we did have very specific debates here on this floor of the chamber. I think we need to, as far as the government is concerned, we need to come up with a direction. And that would be more like optimizing the Q&A session here. Mr. Albert Ho. Well, I'd like to correct you, Mr. Chief Executive. You said that the pandemic hasn't got any consensus as far as political development is concerned, and this is not correct. In 0708, we do have a consensus for universal suffrage for the 2 sets of election. And our consensus is that we can have universal suffrage for 2 sets of election in 2012. We do accommodate each other. If I talk about this, I'm sure the Chief Executive would be bringing up the CSD. If I may put a question here, a very short one. Ching Chang. He's been convicted, and the verdict was put in the public domain, and it has given rise to a very vehement reaction in Hong Kong and internationally. We had the motion debate. We cast doubt on the validity of the verdict. It doesn't make sense for us to pursue this. But the thing is that we do have a consensus for Mr. Ching Chung to be released on medical parole because his condition, physical condition, is getting worse. I'm sure you're aware of our consensus. What have you done, Mr. Chief Executive, during your duty visit? Did you bring this up and try to address this issue and get Ching Chung to be released as soon as possible?
Well, with regard to the timetable for universal suffrage, I think my intention is very clear, but then the substance of how that can be achieved has to be worked out. If I misread the newspapers, I think that was reported in the press, and within the pan-democratic camp, if you have already achieved a consensus, perhaps you can also let me know, even after the meeting, for example, how you're going to return the chief executive by universal suffrage or return this legislature by universal suffrage. Well, at the Commission on Strategic Development, if we have this consensus, that would be very helpful. With regard to Ching Chung's case, number one, Ching Chung has been convicted under the mainland's legal system, and wherever I have a chance, I would always bring this up. And I've also strived my best to help Ching Chung's family. In fact, I've done this, and on every occasion where I have this opportunity, I've done that, and I will continue with that. With regard to the constitutional development, I'd like to say one more thing. Well, on the overriding principle, we have already agreed on that, and for the details, we have to be more accommodating. But then if you want us to give you the consensus, we'll try our best to do that as soon as possible. Well, Mr. Albert Ho, I think the question that you asked earlier has nothing to do with this, and if you want to engage in a debate with the CE, then you can do that in private. Well, about Ching Chung's case, you have not answered my question. Well, since the clear motion debate in this council, and also the motion being carried, that is, we hope that Ching Chung could be released on medical parole. Well, have you done anything about that? Well, obviously, you would be able to, your remarks would be able to carry more weight, and also you as the representative of the community, the state would also be willing to listen to your remarks. All right, for the other issues, you're not able to come up with specifics, but then on this, can you put your mind to that? Can you work a bit harder to help Ching Chung so that he can be released earlier? Well, let me say this once again. Well, public debate on issues like this might not be helpful. As I said, every time when I have a chance to meet with state leaders, I have brought this up for discussions. Well, not too long ago, I was in Beijing for my duty visit, and you also know when your motion debate took place. So if you read my answer very carefully, then you would know that I've already done what I have. Mr. Alan Leung, well, during the past few weeks, Mr. Chief Executive, well, Hong Kong people have seen that with regard to heritage conservation policy is like a roller coaster. All right, there was a policy decision that very stringent action being taken to demolish Star Ferry clock tower overnight, and it was also turned into debris. And then you had the letter to Hong Kong, and then a few days ago, Dr. Patrick Ho made a statement that a consultation would be taking place, which is a long overdue exercise that we've been waiting since 2004. So why have this change taken place? Is it that you have completely changed this patriarchal elitist mindset in governing Hong Kong, and you've been able to absorb civil society's wisdom so that the community can be involved in this process? Or are you just responding to this sort of recalcitrant mentality in a community, and they are not part of your elitist circle? All right, if the approach is like what I said as the former one, then why is it that we have not been able to see this change in mindset from Dr. Ho's statement? Or if it's the latter, then is it just going to be a lip service which will not be able to respond to the community's aspiration for a sense of identity and a sense of belonging? As some Kai Fong said, you might just be playing lip service to this, and there is nothing concrete in what you're going to do. Chief Executive, First of all, I really admire the cynical remarks by Mr. Leung. I think I really have to learn from him. First, on the Star Ferry incident, it's not just for me, and I'm sure it's the same for Mr. Leung and also the entire Council. We have seen a sudden awakening of Hong Kong people. Well, setting aside the Star Ferry pier incident, well, there's been no room for maneuvering. With regard to heritage conservation policy, I think we have to be modest in looking into this. And that is my own belief and also the belief of my colleagues. Do we have a heritage conservation policy? My answer is in the affirmative. And I'm sure Dr. Ho has told you that we have got this policy in place and we have constraints, we have criteria to determine which buildings will have to be preserved, what heritage will have to be conserved. And we have also spelled out that under these constraints, we have to come up with a list, and we have over 490 buildings which are regarded as historic buildings that have to be protected. Well, that has been done in the past, but then circumstances have changed. As Mr. Leung just said, the sense of identity and also this identification with history have changed, and therefore we have to respect that, and what can be done and what has to be done. I think Dr. Ho has already explained that very clearly. We are now putting everything out for you to see. Our existing policy is that, well, for heritage conservation, doesn't mean that the government will have to take over all these heritage. It doesn't just look at the history of these buildings and also the value of these buildings. We also have to look at how we can strike a balance between economic value, development, and also the value of these buildings. I think everything will have to be put out for discussion, and I think we have to put out all these things for discussion, and if these are not sufficient, then we will have to think about what needs to be considered. Well, under these considerations, we have already put up this list of 490 odd buildings. If you think that the list is too long or too short, then we will be prepared to discuss further with you about this. And we will have to discuss all these in greater depth. As regards how we can preserve or conserve these buildings, should it be paid for by the taxpayers? Or are there any other ways to shoulder the cost? And what would be the responsibilities or liabilities? And how are we going to take care of the interests of the property owners? And if we are going to take care of their interests, would that also involve the question of transfer of interest? So we will have to look at all these very carefully. And on this, I'll try to find answers to all these questions. I would be more than willing to put out the policy for discussion so that we can formulate the policy together, so that we can have further discussions, so that we can delineate everything very clearly before a decision is taken. If there are individual problems that have to be resolved, then we will look at that on a case-by-case basis. We will look at public interest before we do what we have to do. And I believe that this is a major policy issue, and I do welcome that the policy be reviewed again. But we have to find a way out that is acceptable to all, a policy which is acceptable to all the stakeholders and parties, and we have to come up with a list of historic buildings that is acceptable to all. And if that affects government buildings, affecting the development potential in the future, and if that involves private buildings, and how we're going to protect private owners' interests, these are constitutional rights that have to be protected, and these are things that we have to discuss and we have to look into.
Mr. Leung, so I can feel comfortable to tell the resident that the chief executive is not fobbing him off. Mr. Chief Executive, you probably remember that in 2004, the government did put out a consultation paper. At that time, there was an undertaking that by the end of that year, there would be a phase 2 consultation document with recommendations. We've been waiting for 2 years or more, and we're going to be kept waiting for 6 more months. If you want me to tell the resident or the citizen that the chief executive is not fobbing him off, why is it that you didn't come up with recommendations in accordance with the 2004 document? Yes, there was a list that was made available at that time. But the people of Hong Kong are not happy with such arrangement. They like to have more considerations. They like to have more elements, including the collective memories. Our consultation must cover all views. We like to build up the policy again with the new policy. We like to embrace the views of the people of Hong Kong. And the criteria that I referred to, I think they can be calibrated and be translated into policies which are acceptable to the people of Hong Kong, even with the best of policies. If there is a building which there is a building there which is debatable, we may not be able to get the consensus of everybody. In overseas countries, there may be a consensus on the demolition of a certain structure. By the time of demolition, there are still people who would chain themselves to the structure to prevent the demolition from going ahead. Even with a list, a consensus, a policy, or whatever, we cannot ask everybody to agree on certain things. For the staff area, I fully respect the passion of the young people, and I mean we need to have the patience, the forbearance to listen to them. But once a decision is taken, the implementation difficulties would not be any less. That's the reality that we have to contend with. But policy-wise, we can certainly have more discussions. Thank you very much, Chief Executive. You've answered 15 questions from 15 members. There are 24 members who have yet to been able to put questions. I hope that they would get a chance next time. The Chief Executive will now leave the chamber. Will members please stand? Thank you all very much.